All right. So I'm Troy Kelly, and I'm a land consultant with Pacific Gas and Electric. And for the last 5 years, I've been working on land conservation commitment, along with folks like Steve Schweigert at Stewardship Council, my counterpart there, Nils and Shelton at the Land Trust, and folks at the Maidu Summit Consortium as well as many other watersheds that I'm responsible for these transactions. I don't know if you can put the slide up, Nils, that I provided earlier, but not critical if we can't. But we've got 140,000 acres that we're responsible for, and that means that as part of our bankruptcy settlement in 2003 with the Public Utilities Commission, we're required to put conservation easements on all 140,000 acres, as well as donating some of those lands, and some of those lands we will retain. In total, there's 98 transactions that we're responsible for, and this has been going on since settlement in 2003. So it's been a very long process, and I've been here a relatively short period of time, but 5 years is it's been a while. So 44 of those transactions are donated, and those are to qualified organizations like government entities, like the Forest Service, CAL FIRE, state parks, but we also have donations with tribes. In my particular area in northern part of our service territory, I have transactions with the Pitt River Tribe, Otter Valley Tribe, and the Maidu Summit Consortium here in the Lake Almanor Basin. 54 of those 98 transactions are retained transactions, and basically that means those are areas that they have so many FERC facilities that we really can't donate those. They would compromise our FERC license, and that's why they cannot be donated. But they do have conservation easements on them, just like Lake Almanor. Lake Almanor is what we call a retained conservation easement. PG&E owns the land, and Feather River Land Trust will hold the conservation easement here. But we have donated land in the Lake Almanor Basin, 4 properties around Lake Almanor that are in the process or already have been donated to the Maidu Summit Consortium, along with nearby transactions. We've completed the Humbug Valley or Tasman Koyam transaction, which was a pretty historic moment. And we also have retained transactions at Mountain Meadows, where Feather River Land Trust is the conservation easement holder, and also Butt Valley Reservoir. So a lot of activity in the basin, and I've had the pleasure and opportunity to develop some really beneficial relationships with the Land Trust, the Maidu Summit Consortium, and many other folks that are involved in these very complicated and long transactions. But the good news is that these continue. These conservation easements are in perpetuity. So I get the opportunity to work with folks and monitor these conservation easements on an annual basis, so that the conservation easement holders, in this case Feather River Land Trust, they're our partners. They get to monitor our properties every year, and they get to tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And it's very helpful for us. We get a chance to manage our lands better and to manage the beneficial public values that they're protected for. And those beneficial public values are really what is at the heart of our conservation easements. And those values are habitat for fish and wildlife and plants. That's a biggie, obviously. And we also, one of the beneficial public values is for forest resources, which that protects forest management, timber harvesting in particular. We also have another BPP for scenic, for recreation, which is, in this case, the BPPs for Lake Almanor are obviously things like camping, picnicking, hiking, fishing, birding, boating, and sightseeing. Another beneficial public value is just protecting the scenic viewshed of the property, so that people get to see those unobstructed views of the forest landscape and the lake. We also have our final beneficial public value is historical and cultural resources. So we're required by law, obviously, to protect many historical and cultural values there. And some of those can be quite sensitive and are things that we don't necessarily want the public to know about. There might be, for instance, some Native American artifacts in a particular area, but those things aren't disclosed. But obviously, the things that people do see, they're welcome to see and enjoy on the property.
Great, Troy. That's a nice overview. Wonderful. Do you have anything to add before we move on, Troy?
No, I'd be happy to answer any questions. It's just I know I have been very fortunate that it's never been nothing's ever really smooth. It's obviously taken a long time, and sometimes we have to negotiate over things like conservation easements to get things that each entity needs to work for them. And it's been a learning experience for me, and I've been very fortunate to develop, I think, professional relationships and friendships with the folks in the Almanor Basin. So thanks, Niels.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to have you with us on this journey. Great. Well, thanks so much, Troy. I'm glad you could make it to this presentation. Next, we're going to talk with Lorena Gorbett from the Maidu Summit Consortium. Hi, Lorena. You out there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, yeah, and what I want to do is give an update on our different parcels that we got. I believe I had some slides that we'll start with. If they could
those should pop up in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, well, the first one is a map of our traditional territory of our Mountain Maidu people. And I wanted to show that one. Maybe they'll come. But our Maidu Summit is made up of 9 members or organizations and tribes in our Mountain Maidu territory. We have 2 federally recognized tribes, 2 unfederally recognized tribes, 3 nonprofit organizations, and 2 Native American associations as members. And so we feel like we represent all of our Mountain Maidu people. When the opportunity to go after the Stewardship Council land, the PG&E land, came up, we didn't want one tribe, one organization to be in control of the land. We wanted it for all our people. And so we used our Maidu Summit group that had been organized in 2003 for sacred site protection in our territory, and use that and those members to incorporate the Maidu Summit Consortium and go after the land title to these lands. I don't think we're going to get my slides. What I wanted
Maria, what's going on with the slides?
Was go over a past update, and it was over, and it also had the PG&E. Okay.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, number 2, if we could go back to number 2 real fast, was this the territory, and you can see how Lake Almanor is kind of off to the left, Honey Lake Valley to the right, and then it goes as far south as south of Quincy to Pilot Peak area. And so it takes in most of our Northern Sierra and most of Plumas County. Okay, and then
that's
if
helpful.
we
Thank you, Lorena.
On down to slide 9. Let's skip on down to it. Yeah, see, this one is the yellow squares are Indian allotments in Big Meadows, Mountain Meadows, Humbug Valley, Butte Valley. And then the purple is shows PG&E lands where they were available, the parcels. The parcels that we actually applied for is Humbug Valley down at the far left, the bottom left. That large area is Humbug Valley. Um, the upside down L, just south of Prattville, is our forestry parcel. Over on Goose Bay, there's a small parcel that isn't under the water off the west side of Goose Bay, and that's our trail parcel. Above the causeway, up where all this purple is above the causeway, there's two parcels that we um, are getting. One is Benner Creek on the west side and Mud Creek on the right, on the east side above the causeway. And then on East Shore, there's a parcel that's right on Lake Cove. And that is our cemetery parcel. There's a Indian cemetery there. And that was the main reason for getting that parcel. Okay, the next slide. If we could go to 10. Okay, this is just a fast update on those. On Humbug, Tasman Koyam, it's 2,325 acres. We received the deed September 20th last year. Our plans include creek, meadow, forest restoration, campground enhancement, improvements in the campground, a visitor center where the old line shack is in the middle of the valley, and then trails, and of course we'll maintain the current cabin leases that are there. Second one is the Maidu Trail. That's the little one on Goose Bay. It's 8 acres. We received the deed December 31st, 2019. The plans include trails and lake access, plant and forest restoration. And we're talking about with the Shoreline Garden Group from the South Lassen Watershed group about a plant garden there. Okay, the third one is the Maidu Forest parcel south of Prattville. That's 164 acres. We received the deed in March. Plans include forest, meadow restoration, trails. We plan on putting our cultural center here, which will include a museum, curation center, offices, classrooms, probably a maintenance building, maybe some crew housing. And that is the only parcel that we rarely have any construction on. And that's all going to be right there at where the road takes off the Butte Valley from Highway 89. It'll be off that corner. The property goes to that corner. And it'll be off the dirt road that parallels Highway 89 at that corner. The next one is the Maidu Wetlands, and that's both of the parcels above the causeway. They're combined and called the Wetlands parcel. The Benner Creek parcel is 183 acres, and Mud Creek is 141 acres. It's currently in escrow, I hope. It's supposed to be. So we're expecting the deed this summer. And our plans include the creek and forest restoration and plants. There's a lot of plants on the Mud Creek parcel especially that we want to be able to gather and do some kind of garden there too. There's a lot of shoreline in that parcel. It goes clear, most of the shoreline along the east shore, the east side above the causeway. The Maidu Cemetery parcel on East Shore is right at Lake Cove. Lake Cove has a resort lease that we'll be carrying on with, that we're part of their spots where their campers are on it. We're expecting the deed to this late this year, and plans include the forest restoration and probably some trails, because a lot of the land is across above the railroad, and there's not road access, so there'd be maybe a hiking trail access up in that area. So that's a real quick overview. It's the total of 2,963 acres. And I think that's all. Parcel 11 is this slide 11 here. Is this that we're doing land management plans for each parcel. And in these plans, we establish our right to the lands, establish the importance of regaining the lands, the need for traditional stewardship, and establishing community as well as public benefit of the Maidu land ownership. And I'm open to questions when we have the questions and answers session.
Hey, Lorena, that was awesome. Thank you so much for all that you've done to get us to this point. You've been a huge part of this process, and it's wonderful that you're here to be able to talk about it today. It's really exciting to work with you all on this.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, and I did.
Thanks, Lorena. Go ahead.
I did mention that in Humbug that besides the Feather River Land Trust being the conservation easement holder, they're co-holders with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I want to be sure we include them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lorena. Great work. Next up, we have Shelton Douthit, my boss and the executive director of the Feather River Land Trusts.
Thank you, Nils. And again, thanks for being such a great MC on this adventure today. We heard a lot already about the different conservation initiatives being done in Lake Almanor. And I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the Land Trust does in general. We're a nonprofit public entity. We were formed in 2000, and we have a board of 9 board members from the Watershed. Our office is in Quincy, but we have a very active northern effort, which Nils is our regional manager. So he's got a better sense of humor than I do. So always work with Nils to start with. But in any case, you can see here this slide. It shows the map of the upper Feather River Watershed, which is our landscape that we work in. It's 2.8 million acres, so we got a lot of ground to cover from Chester all the way down to Sierraville. So we can go to the next slide, and this gives you a sense how we conserve lands or how we fulfill our mission. We do it in 3 ways. We actually do what we call land protection, which is the protection of the land through either conservation easements or through the acquisition of the land itself, fee title. We care for the land. We call that land stewardship. And that's all the hard work of maintaining, restoring, and enhancing the landscape and the different conservation values or beneficial values that are out there. And then our third step in the process of fulfilling our mission is to connect people with these landscapes. And again, it's so important that these places are living places, and we're living within this landscape and this watershed. So having a connection to these places through outdoor education, through trails, through different ways of getting people out there. That's the third thing we do to implement our mission. So we can talk specifically about conservation of these lands. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. So we can go to our next slide. And let's see if that's going to happen or not. Yeah, there it is. Yay. So we conserve land in 2 ways. And you've heard a lot already tonight about the Stewardship Council and PG&E and the fulfilling the land conservation commitment that came out of the bankruptcy way back when. And so what that involves is land being retained by PG&E and a conservation easement held by the land trust, by Feather River Land Trust. And in the case of Tasmacoyam, it's also being co-held by Cal Fish and Wildlife. So conservation easements are legally binding contracts that are recorded. They run with the land, and they're meant to be perpetual. And they basically what a landowner does when they enter into a conservation easement is that they permanently get rid of, or another way to term, they extinguish development rights. So that's the main thing that conservation easements do. The landowner gives up development rights, the right to subdivide or to do other major land changes, and in exchange for either a bankruptcy settlement, or in some cases we buy conservation easements, and in other cases easements are donated to us. So that's what an easement does. It's pretty basic, but included with conservation easements are a series of do's and don'ts that the landowner agrees to follow. They're called prohibited and permitted uses. So Troy mentioned earlier, many of the continuing permitted uses that you'll see happen on the lands around Lake Almanor that are owned by PG&E. And it's our job as the easement holder to monitor compliance with those restrictions. So we go out every year and we inspect the properties, and then we work with PG&E and other private landowners to further preservation efforts of the conservation values or beneficial public values. So we will partner with these landowners on projects to enhance these conservation values. Everything from removing old fence lines to planting willows and doing other improvements to visitor parking areas and trails and things like that. The second way we conserve land is purchasing it outright. And I think if you want to go to the next slide, I think most of you are familiar with the fact that we purchased the Olson Barn property and we own it and manage it for the multiple conservation values that are there. Again, that's a good example of why we needed to act. That property was on the market. It was already actually permitted for a fairly significant subdivision. And the barn itself is such an iconic historic landmark that the land trust felt they needed to acquire it and own it to be able to preserve and restore that barn and also the habitats that are found there. So lastly, the reason why we purchased land is also to provide an opportunity for public access. So we can build trailheads and build and maintain trails and other interpretive elements like outdoor classrooms for our learning landscapes programs and other features. So we do own lands throughout the watershed, and in Lake Almanor, or in the Lake Almanor Basin, we do own the Olson Barn property. And then we can go to the next slide. And here's another example of a property that we purchased. And it's over in Westwood, and it's called the Gateway property, Gateway Preserve. And it's only 8 acres, but it does a lot for 8 acres. It created a physical land bridge from a public road, Delwood Road in Westwood, and it created actual legal access to the Mountain Meadows Reservoir adjacent to Westwood. So by us purchasing it, we were able to prohibit future development of the wetlands that were right in that area, but it also created an opportunity to create all sorts of trailheads and parking areas and kiosks and outdoor classrooms that are, in the town of Westwood, and that makes the connection to the adjacent 7,000 acres of PG&E lands that are also now under a conservation easement. So we do protect land through fee title. We don't do it too often. Most of the work we do in the basin and in the watershed are conservation easements. So we can go to the next slide. And so in the North region, we call it the North Fork region. Our goal is to protect 43,000 acres. Most of that is going to be the conservation easements with PG&E and also the Maidu Summit Consortium. We have 9 conservation easements that will hold in the basin or in the North Fork. So that will, to date, we protected 9,555 acres, but we got a ways to go. So over the next 2 years, you'll be seeing a lot more that's primarily conservation easements closing around Lake Almanor. And I think the big one you're hear the most about is the work we're doing with PG&E on the lake itself. All right. I think that's let's go to the next 2 slides, the next map. This gives you a little view of where these lands are. The conservation work that we're doing that's currently in progress are the darker green areas. And you can see a lot of the land around Lake Almanor that is not underwater is mostly what we call the Chester Meadow region. And that's both north and south of Olson Bard. And that's the really rich wet meadow and wetland landscape. And then if you also look over by Westwood, we're doing a lot of work on the Goodrich Creek meadow and Goodrich Creek Delta area. And in that case, we're working with private property owners to enter into conservation easements. So our work in the North Fork is not solely devoted to working with PG&E. We are working with a number of other landowners, and over the next couple of years, we're going to expand that effort to protect important wetlands and springs and other elements. We've determined through our own internal planning and GIS-driven planning that the upper watershed is really going to be critical, especially as the climate changes. So we're here to stay in the North Fork, and again, most of what we'll be doing, you'll be seeing in the Lake Almanor Basin. But our partners are really important to what we're doing, and having a good relationship with PG&E, and also our fabulous relationship with the Maidu Summit Consortium, and the fact that it's just so great to be part of such a historic effort to reconnect the Maidu with these homelands. It's just an honor to be working with everyone on that project. So lastly, here are some stats for some projects. On the left-hand side, you can see what we've completed: Olson Barn, the Gateway property, the Mountain Meadows Reservoir, Tasmankoyam, the Maidu Forest, and the Maidu Trail. And then on the right are the projects that are in the current pipeline. As Lorena mentioned, the Maidu Wetlands, the cemetery, and then we've got Lake Almanor, the PG&E lands, that's 29,000 acres. Butt Valley, which will hopefully be closing that easement fairly soon. That's a little over 2,400 acres. And then we're going to be finishing our work at Bucks Lake, which is another PG&E retained land. That will be next summer. So anyway, that's the rundown on what we're up to from a conservation standpoint in the North Fork.
Great, Sheldon. Thank you. That was well done. Well done. We're a little over time, but we're going to move on. Next, we have a Leslie Mink from Plumas Corporation, and she's standing by. So Leslie, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. I submitted a lot of slides, and it was way too many slides, so we will skip through quite a few. I'm going to talk about the restoration efforts that we are involved with. Primarily, actually, in the Mountain Meadows Reservoir watershed, which is a tributary to Lake Almanor. The project that I'm most familiar with is on Collins Pine property. It's the Rock Creek area, which is a tributary. I don't know if you know where that is, Maria, if you could point to it, but it's a tributary to Hamilton Branch, Hamilton Branch connects Mountain Meadows Reservoir to Lake Almanor, and Rock Creek is a tributary to Hamilton Branch. And we are working with Collins Pine. Their primary concern, maybe go to the next slide, please. Their primary concern with their two section parcel at Rock Creek, the project area, well, you can see it has a pink outline in both of those slides. The light pink outline on the slide on the left is their two section parcel, Collins Pine. And so they are going to be doing some vegetation management in there this fall. But the primary concern with that area, particularly in the dark pink outline, is a lodgepole encroachment like I have never seen before. It is unbelievable. It is a thicket and it is a fire hazard. So they are planning to do a lot of removal of the lodgepole, and in that way they are going to release some beautiful riparian vegetation, riparian meadow habitat, aspens, willow, just fantastic habitat in that area that's right now is just covered with lodgepole. We are involved because Plumas Corporation main focus when we do land restoration. Yeah, so there's some beautiful habitat on the left, and on the right is the lodgepole thicket. But you can see meadow vegetation under all those lodgepoles. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. It's been very difficult to plan a project in that area because you can't see where you're going, and you walk around for a while and then you don't even know where you are. Let's see. So in that project area, so we're I forgot what I was going to say because that.
Well, Leslie, you were saying just Plumas Corp is involved because
right,
what you do.
Thank you. Because we do watershed restoration. So lots of times lodgepole will encroach upon meadows because the meadow has been dried out, and a number of meadows in the Sierra Nevada have been dried out purposefully to improve perhaps cattle grazing, or perhaps to grow timber, but you can see that it doesn't grow timber very well. It just kind of grew lodgepole thickets. So what we do is to bring the water table back up in the project area to encourage herbaceous meadow vegetation, because that is what generally keeps trees out, is a high enough water table. So if you remove the lodgepole, but you don't deal with the hydrologic underlying problem of the meadow drying out, then you're likely to get lodgepole encroachment again. Now, this is what we are thinking, but we're all moving forward in history, and we've received a landscape that our forebears, worked on. And so we will see. Now, Chris Fleet is from Cal Poly, is one of the partners in this project, along with Point Blue Conservation Science, Collins Pine Sierra Institute. It's a really good project. And but anyway, Chris Fleet worked with Collins Pine on the Marion Meadow Restoration Project, and there was no channel manipulation after that, even though there is a down cut channel through Marion Meadow. So, and they did see some hydrologic benefit just from removing the lodgepole, which basically all those lodgepole trees act like a straw, sucking the water out of the meadow. So when you remove all those straws, then you are going to see a hydrologic benefit. Whether or not the lodgepole will come back, it looks like they are staying out of Marion Meadow, but we wanted to ensure that they stay out of Rock Creek. So we put in, we are involved with this project to do that part. So right now we are still in the planning phases, And so we have a stream flow gauge. I wanted to show you pictures of our instrumentation that we have out there. The one on the photo on the right is a stream gauge that measures stream flow. We can only measure it when in non-winter flows, but it's generally the base flow that is most important. That's when people want to use the water the most. And the slide on the left shows a groundwater well, which will give us very detailed numbers as far as where the groundwater level is in relation to, well, just where it is. And so that will help us manage or understand how the lodgepole, what kind of groundwater they can or cannot tolerate. And Chris Surflee is also doing some excellent, really excellent work with his students, doing vegetation plots out there and doing kind of evapotranspiration from individual trees. So gosh, I think I have maybe 2 more minutes, maybe go. Okay, so now some projects that we are working on is also again in the Mountain Meadows Reservoir watershed, Mackenzie Creek and Mountain Meadows Creek. I think that is Mackenzie at the top there. And both of these areas have, you know, severely down-cut channels that are really drying. You can see that vegetation there used to be, you know, herbaceous meadow vegetation, and now you're getting sagebrush coming in. So next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? And anyway, so the Mackenzie Creek is about 700 acres. And then Mountain Meadows Creek is 838 acres. And that project includes both floodplain restoration. You can see, I wasn't kidding when I said they were big gullies. And this one is still actively down cutting. But floodplain restoration and forest restoration. You know what, I think I better stop there